Looking to start a podcast but don't know where to begin? Look no further. The team at Dodge Media Productions has 20 years of experience as podcast listeners and observing the industry and 8 years experience in podcast production. We can help you take your podcast from idea to fruition, and we'll make the process seamless and easy. We'll help you with everything from recording and editing to hitting the charts on Apple Podcasts. So what are you waiting for? Contact us today and let's get started. DodgeMediaProductions.com.
You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. This is episode 168, and we are talking about superfan Udo's pick from our contest we had last year, Inside Man. It's from 2006. It's a Spike Lee film who we know from 1989's Do the Right Thing, 91 Jungle Fever, and 92's Malcolm X. He was busy right there in that short span of time.
Gotta say, I don't think I ever heard of this film or saw a trailer or a video cassette cover. I mean, this is a complete mystery to me. Never heard of this film before.
I agree. Thank you, Udo, for bringing this film to us.
Right.
All right. It stars Denzel Washington, Clive Owen, Jodie Foster, Christopher Plummer, and Willem Dafoe. I always thought it was William when I was a teenager, but I now know it's Willem.
So I thought that this film was after Jodie Foster had stopped acting. Mm-hmm. But then I think she was in Hotel Artemis. But as a general rule, she doesn't act so much anymore. I thought she'd more moved into the directing part.
She did for a bit, but like just recently she was in Naiad.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, really good in that. I highly recommend that movie. It's wonderful. The writer for this film is Russell Gurwitz. He brought us 2008's Righteous Kill. And then 2019, they tried to do a TV show called Inside Man Most Wanted. And so he wrote that as well, which makes sense.
TV show for heist is hard, I think, because each week you have to have a believable heist.
How do you keep going? Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to tell you that the DP is Matthew Laboutique. He did 2000's Requiem for a Dream.
He wasn't in Little House on the Prairie, though, right? That was a different Matthew something.
Yeah. He did 2010's Black Swan, 2017's Mother, and 2018's A Star is Born. So
also busy.
Yes, very busy and like big films. The filming locations for this film was the Financial District, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Battery Park, the Brooklyn Bridge. So a very, not surprising for Spike Lee, but a very New York-based film. The synopsis for this film is: a police detective, a bank robber, and a high-powered broker enter high-stakes negotiations after the criminal's brilliant heist spirals into a hostage situation. Only one tagline for you this week.
Yeah?
It looks like the perfect bank robbery, but you can't judge a crime by its cover.
It's okay, but it's a little bit, I think, a little cheesy. You can't judge a crime by its cover. I was going to say it's an interesting premise, right? In that there is a third person in the negotiations, because normally you think of like cops have a person and the bank robbers have a person, but then the Jodie Foster character is kind of this wild card. So that's an interesting setup.
So let's get into kind of the meat of it. I do want to share one piece of trivia that I think will influence the rest of our conversation. And then I want you to hit us with the pickup line, and then maybe we go into kind of the synopsis and what you're talking about, the Jodie Foster character. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I read that actually, because this is an Imagine Entertainment film, and so Ron Howard was slated to direct this. And so him and his friend Brian Grazer got the script and, greenlit it, and he was all set, but then he got called away for another film. I don't remember if the trivia told me. And so they thought, well, maybe Spike could do this. And that makes so much sense now, because it does not feel like a traditional Spike Lee film. There are
Absolutely not.
There are elements that I was like, oh, that's definitely a Spike Lee trademark, kind of. But I was like, oh, okay, this makes so much sense now.
Well, it doesn't feel at all like a Spike Lee film to me because race isn't an issue. Denzel Washington, none of his interactions revolve around his race. So it doesn't feel to me
It's not a Spike. It's
in
not
any
a
way, shape, or
traditional-
form
yeah,
a Spike Lee film.
other than he directed.
I mean, he did, and he did a fine job. It's
Right.
just, it's so different than the rest of his film.
Yes. Okay, so what's the pickup line?
My name is Dalton Russell, said by Denzel's character, Dalton Russell.
Oh, okay. I don't remember that. Because I thought it opened with Clive Owen doing his.
I'm sorry, Denzel's not Dalton Russell. That is Clive Owen.
Oh, okay.
My mistake. Yeah, it's Clive Owen's character doing this confessional from, spoiler alert, everybody, from where he's in his little hideaway.
Hidey hole.
Yeah, his hidey hole.
So it starts out, it's supposed to be, it seems like it's a heist film. We just launch right into it. There's no, let's meet the I've seen heist films where we usually see them carry off. And I feel like we watched one recently. They carry off a heist, so we kind of see it. And then we start to get to learn the characters of the team that puts on this heist. And then they do the big heist for the film.
So
This one launches right into the heist for the film.
right, I would say at least now our expectation is from Clooney's Ocean's 11, where Act 1 is establishing why there's going to be a heist, and then the first half of Act 2 introduces us to the cast of characters. We got to see Scotty Conn and Casey Affleck racing little remote control cars.
Right.
And then there's the heist is the big part in Act 2 at the midpoint, and then at the end of Act 2, we think they're going to get caught or something. So there's a fairly, common kind of, but the assemble the team part is I think part of what we expect with some of these movies. And this definitely, it pushes you right into the action. In fact, right after that line that Clive Owen delivers where he says his name, he tells you we just robbed a bank basically and got away with it.
And we really don't learn about the rest of the team. I mean,
we don't. We have no. In fact, we don't even know their names. That we know their aliases that they used during the heist, but we don't know their names. We know nothing about them.
right, which is odd, kind of. I mean, that's
it's different
from.
Yeah, Gerwitz did an interesting thing there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Clive Owen, the criminal, and we have Denzel Washington, the police detective, and we kind of are learning a little bit about them. But then they introduce, and it's a little bit on the nose when a big name actor is portraying a part. Oh, this is an important character.
Right.
So Christopher Plummer is the bank owner.
Right.
I believe he's not just the manager. I believe
Yeah,
he's the bank owner.
he's an owner. Right. Captain Von Trapp.
He hires Jodie Foster,
Right.
who at the time I didn't realize this was kind of her role, but they call it a fixer in
Right.
the trivia and stuff. So she's hired by Plummer because he has something very important in one of the safe deposit boxes, and he's afraid that that's what they're going for.
So we say this a lot, buy the premise, buy the bit. I didn't buy that premise. In my opinion, this whole film hinges on Plummer needing to get the special stuff without other people getting it. But in real life, he would have destroyed it a long time ago. There's no reason you would keep that around.
I mean, should we just call it out? I mean, so
right.
Or should we?
Oh, well, I already told him the spoilers. So the reason I made the crack about Captain Von Trapp is because it's Nazi stuff, and Christopher Plummer famously played Captain Von Trapp in The Sound of Music, but
that we just
talked about. So if you had documentation that proved that your entire business empire was traceable to the Nazis, and there was only one copy, you would destroy it.
You would destroy it.
Yeah, it never existed. I can't imagine how much stuff throughout the history of time.
What benefit would you ever show that and say see, I told you?
Right.
It's not going to be, you're not going to sell that in an auction.
You're not going to hand that down to your children. Right. Oh, I just wanted you to see Grandpa's Nazi documents. Yeah. I mean, again, that's the premise. Now, the interesting thing, though, backing up a little bit, is at a certain level, you do say that Clive Owen and Denzel Washington are cops and robbers, or in that case, robbers and cops. But this is the funny thing. Clive Owen never came across as a bad guy to me. This wasn't good guy, bad guy. This was basically two guys.
No, in fact, they go out of their way to, because did they ever let the kid go?
The only person who got hit or hurt, I said, is Peter Hammond, the bank manager. But although I guess this is maybe a little spikely, but as a reasoning why that's okay to the viewer, his phone has a rap song with the N-word in it as the ringtone. And that kind of bumped me a bit because in my life, I have heard one person have a ringtone that shouts the N-word at people, and it was a rap song, but it was a black guy. I just had a hard time buying that some 45-year-old white bank manager would have that as a ringtone. Because what if his wife calls?
Right.
Right?
And so there's a kid involved and the kid doesn't get hurt. And then they go out of their way to try to keep the cops kind of on their toes. They mimic.
Yeah, hurting people.
An assassination of one of the hostages.
Right.
But then later we find out that they went to great pains. To make it look real.
Correct.
And so they obviously were very much not interested in hurting anyone.
Right.
In that sense of like a bad guy.
So the majority of what they steal is diamonds because they're density, right? Value density.
And they're probably easy to fence, I would think.
Well, that's the thing. So I have read separately about things in general. You get 10%, so a dime on the dollar for stolen goods because they're hot, they're hard to move. But diamonds, there's the De Beers monopoly. I don't know how easy it is actually to fence stolen diamonds. I'm curious if one of our listeners might know. Maybe if there's a listener who's from South Africa where they have some diamond trade, they might know. It would be curious. I don't know how easy it is to sell that stuff.
Yeah.
But so they don't hurt anybody. They use fake guns. We find out later.
You go, oh, that's right. I forgot that part.
The rabbi is in on it. Sorry, spoiler alert again. Although that was I did have that suspicion when I saw it. So not too much of a spoiler. So they're really actually kind of Robin Hood bank robbers.
Yeah.
Although we never find out what the good is. But because Plumber's a Nazi, I think we're like, it's okay. It's cool.
So in the spirit of Robin Hood, even... Were they ever even after the document that Plumber is concerned about? Or were they really after the diamonds? Because let's take the diamonds from the dirty Nazi lover.
Yeah.
And, but we don't see what Clive does with them.
We don't know, but I did wonder if the filmmakers intended it to be that they're just primarily for the Nazi documents and the diamonds were a nice side effect. I don't know.
Well, and so is that a little bit kind of, sorry, Matthew, is that a little bit of a ding in the writing that what is in it for Clive? I mean, generally for bank robbers, it's
money.
It's money. It's what, yeah. So was he just in it?
But at some
point, or was
point,
he trying to stick it to Christopher Plummer?
At some point, Jodie Foster says something about, and in the future, if they come back to blackmail you with the document, you just pay. So that was the hint to me that perhaps that was the case. Now, I have to say to the screenwriter, to give him credit, we don't know the script as it was originally written.
Right.
It's possible somebody along the way
good point
munched some of this. But the other thing that I thought was immediately glaring, and I think would have changed the whole dynamic of the film, is they never got the FBI involved. And in the United States, the FBI is the people who are responsible for both bank heists and hostage situations. Yes. So I think they would have been called immediately.
Yes, I can say on good authority, generally when the bank robber comes in and they run out the first call, I wonder, I could ask somebody who could tell us, is the first call to the local police or the FBI? I thought it was the FBI.
And it's my understanding, and we could ask Chris Voss, but the hostage situation, it's just you stall until the FBI guys get there to talk to him.
Right.
And furthermore, New York City residents may say this is realistic, but near the end of the film, the bad guys are presumably hiding as hostages. And so when they let everyone go, the New York Police Department shoots everyone that comes out the door.
I know, that seemed a little...
I felt like even if you're using rubber bullets, which by the way are still possibly lethal.
Could be lethal, yeah.
But even if they weren't, you don't just open fire.
Right.
So That both of those things, I think, were there to make the plot hang together, and it's a fine heist film. I mean, I think in real life, isn't it on the order of hundreds of dollars that bank robbers get? They don't get the big heist that we see in the films.
Correct.
So again, we're suspending some disbelief. This is a movie. Don't get too upset. But so there's some.
But there were some things that I couldn't tell. Were they just red herrings to kind of throw us off?
Right.
And so it made for a little bit of a confusing story. Because like I said, there was a lot of effort put into while the hostages were being negotiated and kind of all that was going on. Some of the team was digging into the flooring.
Yes.
And then there was this scene where they call over, I thought it was Clive Owen.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, and you see dirt, and then you see
like a sewer pipe or something.
Yeah, like a big municipal style pipe.
Yeah.
And they both kind of look at each other, and so you're like, whoa, what's that mean?
This is important.
And then he's hiding in a hole in a wall later, we find out. So it was like, why was so much effort paid on the hole in the ground? Like, it just made for a confusing storyline. I don't know if it was supposed to be like, oh, look, you can't hide here because there's this pipe, so we have to change it. But then you never saw them hide, like whacking away at the hole and creating the hole in the wall that he ended up.
While prepping for this podcast, I thought of that again, and I'm still not sure why we were shown that as a viewer.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that stuck out to me before they even got to work digging that hole, they show us this kind of storage room, and it's got metal shelving, looks very industrial.
Uh-huh.
And on the bottom shelf, on the back wall, are 4 boxed Dell desktops. Mm-hmm. 4 cardboard boxes. They're big boxes where they got a computer in them.
They got money from Dell.
But it bumped me immediately because every business in the world, if you buy a computer, it's because you needed it last week and it goes right to somebody's desk. Mm-hmm. You don't keep them around. It's just, okay. But all right, again, like they got money from Dell. They also got money from Dunkin' Donuts. So that was fun. But the other thing that I think makes sense to us, but maybe wouldn't make sense to younger generations or future generations, is the people standing in line in that bank. So we are used to banks with marble and gold, and you had to be quiet all the time. And there are people standing in line wasting hours of their life waiting for someone to give them their money back. And to people with Zelle, that makes no sense. Right. Like, there's a generation that has never seen a bank like that, let alone stood in line to cash a check.
2006, which I think we still had.
Yeah, we did.
ATMs, and we didn't have Zelle, though, I bet.
No, I don't think we did. But you know what I'm saying? Like,
but definitely we had ATMs. I don't think that many people would have been in the bank.
For those of us before ATMs were even a thing, you would get a physical check from your burger job, and you would go down to the bank and you would stand in line behind a bunch of other schmucks and you would, cash your check, and they put some of it in your account, which is credit for future cash. And they give you some cash and you walk away. We spent so much of our time doing that.
Yeah, we wasted a lot.
And now, half of the banks are part of a Chuck E. Cheese or something.
Yeah. They're like a tiny little kiosk kind of.
And so what does a bank heist even mean anymore? Right? I mean, it's all probably hacker heist, not physical heist, which is okay. Great movie idea. It's like the last armored car. And they're like, it's his last run. And so the old guy, I'm getting too old for this. And then the bad guys want to, because it's got more money because it's the last run ever. They're cleaning out I got to get to work writing this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So overall, we've talked a little bit about plot. Does Denzel's character change over the course of the film?
Not that I can tell.
They almost, and I was curious.
I was going to say his character's situation changes. Dialogue at the beginning of the film makes it seem like they're the bottom of the barrel detectives. And then by the end, he's a big swinging thing.
Yep. I would agree, which that's why it bumped me, because I have a knowledge of that the FBI is called so quickly, and they do make it seem like they are kind of him and his partner who get sent to the police hostage situation. I was surprised, that the chief would send this team if they are a couple of clowns, and then B, that we wouldn't at least have the scene like in Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 probably, where, you know, the Judge Reinhold character shows up and says like, Axel, get out of here. You don't know what you're doing. This is our turf.
Give me your badge and your gun.
There's always that scene where, you know, either
it's a turf war.
Yeah. And we never had that. And I could see Spike going, I'm not going to do that cliched thing. But the reality is the FBI is called. And so there would be a time when then the NYPD would have to hand it over to the FBI.
Now, I don't believe that there's ever, I shouldn't say ever, but I think it would be very rare that there would be some kind of pissing match between the local cops and the FBI, because you're not a police officer if you buck authority, right? You're kind of selected for somebody who follows kind of the protocol, and the FBI are considered to be very good at police work. They have the respect of other agencies. There are other federal law enforcement agencies that do not have quite as much respect, but the FBI guys are all considered pretty good. So it would not be surprising that in real life, they would be immediately called. They'd show up and everybody say, okay, the FBI is here. What can we do to help you? Right. But it's a cliche in movies where it's like, this is my command center now. But speaking of the command center, that's where we are introduced to Willem Dafoe. And I will say, I don't know if this was obvious to you, but the command center truck that they have, it's like a TARDIS. Did you notice how big the interior was relative to the actual truck itself?
I never really put that together, but you're so right. Well, and one of the things, not to like totally pick on this film, but at a point, the robbers are trying to throw off the authorities. And so they figure out that they've been bugged. And so they put a speaker speaking Ukrainian. Is that what it ended up?
I think it's Albanian. I think it was an Albanian speech.
Yeah. So they put a speaker with Albanian speakers and next to the pizza boxes. So Denzel's trying to figure out what they're saying. And so he goes, put it on the outdoor speakers. And so there's a crowd has amassed, which I've been to New York City enough times that I think if I saw like the barricades and the police activity, that's not a tourist thing that I would stop and watch. I'd just be like, oh, something's going down. And I keep walking towards like the Central Park or wherever I was headed.
I heard Meryl Streep lives on this block.
I wouldn't go, oh, are they shooting NYPD Blue? I don't know. It struck me that like tourists would stop and take picture. That bothered me a little bit.
Right. So, I mean, that's a good point that we are picking a couple of beats here, but I actually think this film as a whole works real well as a heist film.
It does. No, it does. It was an enjoyable film to watch. Yeah, I'm not sorry.
I didn't want that to come across as negative. I actually enjoyed this film.
But wait, can I finish my point?
Oh, sure. Sorry.
And so when he puts it on the outside speakers, that did bump me, though, because I just thought, would you really outsource to the tourists and let out, especially, 2006, there still were phones that people could have recorded. Like you're sending out what you think is the bad guys talking, and you don't know what they're saying.
It could have been the Albanians saying that they'd poisoned the water supply, and you just started a mass hysteria, right? So, yeah.
So that, I was like, I don't think he would just send it. So,
however, but to defend the writer, was the intent that Denzel was a loose cannon, and that's why he was bottom of the barrel detective.
Well, that's a good point, because that does kind of go in line with the character that they had established at that point. Okay, good job. Okay, I'm over that. Any other? What were you gonna start to say when I wanted to finish my point?
Oh, I was just saying that I thought it was an enjoyable heist film. All heist films require a certain suspension of disbelief, because in order for the heist to work, there's lots of, people doing really amazing things. Like, you make a mirror that looks like the hallway so the cops don't investigate something, or you get the guy's fingerprint from his credit card or whatever. I mean, there's a certain amount of that. For a heist film, though, I really felt like this didn't push the bounds too far. This was, I thought, a good film, and it was an interesting take on the subject of a heist film. Like I said, first thing I give him credit for is I didn't really feel like it was good guy, bad guy. Clive Owen didn't feel like a bad guy. He just felt like a guy going to work.
Yeah, I wanted to know more kind of about him and his character.
Yeah.
And like this feels too like it was kind of set up for a sequel because it's like, okay, what is he going to do with all those diamonds?
Right. Yeah. And maybe Ron and Brian are hard to work on that. Who knows? And then, as I mentioned before, the character of that was played by Jodie Foster was an amazing that's a new thing in this genre. So I felt like even without Spike Lee's directing trademarks or his style, it itself was an interesting film, totally different from, other films. Like I mentioned Ocean's 11, which I consider to be kind of the modern classic of heist films, right?
The Italian Job. Everything
I think is after Ocean's 11 is compared to it kind of thing, right? This was just different. And I really appreciated that they did something entirely different.
Yeah. For historical significance, the pizza that the police give to the robbers with the bugs has the name Sal's on it. And that's the name of the pizza place from Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. So
that's a nice nod. Way to go, Spike.
Yeah, I like that. The ground scenes for the bank were filmed inside a real bank, whereas the underground scenes of the bank were filmed on a movie set in Brooklyn, New York.
Which gets to one of my questions, a note I made while watching the film, is did they build that bank vault? And if so, I want to know how props makes those big steel doors and walls, because they look like they're giant steel, and I don't think they really are.
No, in fact, there was a scene, and I was looking for it. I think maybe it's that storage room you were talking about. Was there a bunch of keys on the door?
That was, I think, for the safe deposit boxes. At some point, there were keys, I thought.
People run in and they slam the door, and they said you can see the wall kind of move. So that's definitely
it's
a
not.
set.
Yeah. I didn't think of that earlier in life, but yeah, I've noticed now that you have to be careful when slamming doors on constructed sets because they're not as sturdy as real buildings. So I would love to see even just like a 5-minute little documentary on how does the production design team make a bank vault from scratch? Because it would make sense you would want to build it from scratch, but it needs to look, we have a mind's eye of what a bank vault looks like. And that may not actually be what they look like, but that's what it looks like. Yeah.
I love it. I'm all for a behind the scenes documentary. You know me.
Or even better yet, do they have in like the big warehouse of props, like the door? Like, oh yeah, go requisition the bank vault door.
That's probably one of my saddest things of us moving away from like the DVDs and that we stream everything is the featurettes.
Oh, those were awesome.
And Apple even got us recently because we paid like an extra $1 or $2 because supposedly we got extra content for one of the films. And then I could never find how I get this extra content. So I'll never fall for that again, Apple. I so miss not only like usually they would go around the set talking to not only the crew, but then you would get, if it was a funny movie, you'd get like, Will Ferrell yucking it up with the grip or I don't know. I really, really loved that part of movie making. I mean, that's why I got into filmmaking was all those featurettes. And how are we going to inspire future filmmakers if we don't have those behind the scenes featurettes available for the youth?
You're absolutely correct. And here's the thing is you could, with GoPros and drones and stuff, you could capture that footage very easily. And then aspiring filmmakers could edit that featurette, giving them a good practice. It's a win-win.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's a lost art. Okay. What else did you want to talk about this film?
So there's a lot of interesting camera activity. One of the things that we talked about that you liked that very much bumped me was there was a scene when it was obvious that Denzel was standing on a dolly and he was dragged forward with the camera and you could tell he wasn't walking.
No.
That was bizarre. I didn't care for it. And then when Clive is peeking in his hidey hole, there's a wall that comes up behind him. And it looks to me, at first I thought, is it the Scorsese shot? But then I realized it was probably just they had grips moving the wall behind him. And so there's a lot of interesting camera movements and pannings as well. But the one thing that I didn't expect is I noticed that tear gas works like a fog machine. That was clever, right? Same visual effect as a fog machine. And then when they did the flash forwards to the interrogations, they did kind of the opposite, how people will make things black and white to show it happened in the past. But this to give us a clue that it was in the future. It was weird. The highlights were blown and it was desaturated. So it was definitely a different visual style to tell you that we're a different time frame.
So a couple things, and I'm not trying to like defend Spike, but it's definitely something that I saw in his other works. I think, and I see why you say it bumps you because it's not reality. It's almost like, and I'm not a Spike Lee scholar, I'll say. But what I took from it as just a viewer of other Spike Lee films, it's almost like he kind of plays with space and time in that way. Like we were talking about the scene where Denzel was going faster than a human could go. And he didn't even try to look like he was running.
Yeah, he was standing on the dolly.
No, I know. And so, but what Spike was doing there, it's almost like that lapse in time when you're so angry, you don't remember going from point A to point B. You just need to get there because at that point, Clive had kind of shown him up. Clive's character, I should say. He had shown him up and he was furious at him. I think, is that when like they even killed the hostage maybe? And so he was so furious and so you're right. Like, why didn't he just show him like running up? But that's what I took from it. And it's almost like not in a cartoonish way or in a superhero way, but that's where I've seen Spike in other films kind of play with time and space. And
right. But in other films, he does it more than once. And this was the only time in the film. So it bumped me.
Well, and that could be because this wasn't a Spike Lee film initially. Yeah. And so he was probably, I get it, trying to put his stamp on this film or and this is a filmic language that he has used. And so he was like, oh, this could be where I do this one thing. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I guess it did bump me technically because I was like, oh, there's the Spike Lee thing. So it did kind of take me out of the film, you could say, but I thought it was used effectively, I guess.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was effective. And I'll be honest, if I was the producer, I'd say Spike ditched that shot.
Right.
But, it's each person to their own, right? I don't think it was wrong. It just bumped me.
Yeah, his style of filmmaking.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So under sound, I have a couple notes that I just found interesting. One is, I don't know if you remember this, but Jodie Foster famously went to Harvard, I believe.
I think it was Harvard,
which was kind of a big deal because generally if people made it in Hollywood, quote unquote, they just rode that train. But when she went to Harvard, her and I believe Brooke Shields went to Princeton. It was a big deal because here they had these amazing careers. Why would they bother with college? But it was so important to both of them that they went. And I just remember it being of note. And so she must have learned French there because she dubbed the French version of this film.
Oh, oui.
And so I thought you would enjoy that
yes.
Learning that for the French, Jodie Foster dubbed herself.
When Jodie is on the show, we can speak a little in French then.
There you go. And then the song that you were talking about that Peter Hammond's phone was playing is Kanye West's Gold Digger. Any head trauma in Inside Man?
Well, the rabbi got shoved down in the bank. He may have taken a knock there, and good old Peter Hammond with the Kanye ringtone got curb stomped.
Right. And we are led to believe that a hostage took one, I believe, in the head.
That's true. That is. We found out later that wasn't actually, but it was
perceived
for a while, some virtual head trauma.
Yes. And there was no romance.
Smoochie, smoochie, smoochie. I did not detect any smoochies.
So no smoochies.
Well, however, not necessarily romantic, but Spike did get a bunch of actors and actresses to take all their clothes off at a certain point. And I noticed that they were normal looking people. I mean, there's maybe some of your traditional actors, but they were just normal people standing around in their underpants all day. So, way to go, Spike.
Not for romance sake, though.
Not that I know of.
Okay, and a driving review.
Okay, so there wasn't a whole lot of driving. I did mention earlier that the Freightliner MT-55 that was used for the command center is like a TARDIS, and that the interior was quite a bit larger than the exterior would have been. Mm-hmm. The only other thing is we saw a couple of Crown Vics. The one for the detectives is actually 4 years older than the one for the uniform cops, and I didn't know if that would be true or not. So I'm curious if one of our listeners who's in law enforcement could call in. Do the plainclothes detectives, are their unmarked cars older and crappier than the regular units?
That's a good point. I don't know. Shall we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
Okay. So this film had a budget of $50 million. Like I said, it was the studios were Imagine Entertainment and 40 Acres and a Mule, which is Spike's production company. So for that budget, they made domestically $88.6 million and worldwide $185.8 million. So I would presume a success. Adjusted for today, that would be like $145.8 million. It gets a 7.6 out of 10 on IMDb, which I would say that's actually a pretty fair
that's
score.
a decent score.
Critics give it a 86% and audiences follow right there at 85%, which is kind of what I believe, would surmise or would kind of come to the assessment of is about, a mid-B level.
Yeah.
It comes in right around 2 hours, 9 minutes. It's rated R. It is listed as a crime drama mystery. It won 5 awards and got 12 nominations. In 2007, Spike Lee got the Outstanding Directing for a Feature Film. It won AFI's Movie of the Year that year. Spike won for Best Director for the Black Movie Award. We watched this on Netflix if you want to watch also. So if you already have a subscription to Netflix, you can watch it for free. Let's see what we're going to watch next week.
Duck Soup.
All right, so we will enjoy Duck Soup next week. Everyone have a good rest of your weekend, and never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.